And welcome to Wyoming State Library's webinar today. Today we're going to talk about selecting for the school library collection. My name is Paige Bradenkamp. I'm the school library consultant at Wyoming State Library. And if you are unable to hear me or see the screen, please just let me know in the chat box, and I can do something about that. So who I am, again, I'm Paige Bradenkamp. I graduated with an English degree from Humboldt State University in California. I then went to Chadron State College, got a teaching certificate and a school library media endorsement. And from there, I was a school librarian for 8 years in the states of Nebraska and Wyoming. While I was in Nebraska, in Rushville specifically, I also taught 7th and 8th grade English for 5 years while doing the school library job for the elementary and middle schools there. Then I got the position in Wyoming where I was a school librarian for 2 elementary schools. And now here I am at the Wyoming State Library in Cheyenne as the school library consultant. During those years, I managed a variety of budgets. I had healthy budgets where I had a lot of flexibility with what I spent. And in Wyoming, there's no hard and fast rule for what types of materials a school has to have. In Nebraska, I didn't have such a healthy budget, and for the most part, I was able to buy just what was required by the rules. So I have experience with choosing books, choosing materials based on budget. And so today we'll talk about how to go about selecting to make your school library's collection relevant and current and within your budget. The first thing that you need to think about when you're a school librarian is who your community is. Selecting for a school library is different from selecting for a public library or a medical library or a law library. You need to think about who your community is that you're serving. And I came up with four constituents that you would think about. Students being your first member of the community, and your goal in selecting for your school library is to help the students meet their learning objectives. And you also are trying to help them develop a love of literature. So when you think about students, you want to think about their age group and their interest levels, and that's who you're going to select for. If you're in an elementary school, let's say a K2, you're not going to buy books, you're not going to select books or materials that are geared towards high school students. It wouldn't be appropriate. Another member of your direct community are teachers, and the school library helps support their teaching, and so you want to help them meet their curricular goals. So knowing the curriculum, knowing the standards, and having an idea of what the teachers are, what their units are, what they're talking about in the classrooms, knowing that helps you get materials that support them in the classroom. Teachers are also interested in professional development. So when the budget allows, it's a good idea to have some professional development items on the shelves so that teachers can go to the school library and just pick that up, look through it, and have that there. That's another way to help support the teachers. Administration is another member of your community, and they're interested in professional development as well. And sometimes the administration will come to you and ask for specific materials. And in one of my schools, the principal did come to me and gave me a little extra in my budget so that I could develop a parent shelf in the library so that parents could actually utilize some resources from the school library as well, specifically internet safety, homework help type materials. And so with that, parents are another member of your community, and having materials or having options that help parents help their children in academically or even internet wise, just something there that can give them some resources to help them communicate with their kids and just help them with math or with reading, things like that. So that is who makes up your school library community. If you have any other ideas, something I missed, please let me know. But those are definitely key. Students and teachers being the top priority, because those are the people that you will see every day and you will deal with every day. So after you've identified your community, and before you start selection, one of the things that you really need to refer to is your school or district's selection policy. And if your school or district does not have a selection policy, it would be a very good idea to get one written up as soon as possible. A selection policy offers guidelines for what to purchase, what types of materials to purchase. It also will indicate who is to do the selecting and the purchasing. Typically, a selection policy will state that the certified school librarian will do the purchasing if that person is available. But it's very important to follow the selection policy because it should also reflect the mission and vision of the school district, and it is the rationale behind your selection decisions. And so should any of the materials that you've chosen, should they be challenged, then you have that to back you up as for why that particular material is on the shelf. A selection policy will also should generally state that the school library is interested in having materials that represent all viewpoints and perhaps classics that are used in the school curriculum. It should indicate that the materials are purchased in support of the curriculum. And so having a selection policy and following that will help you in the event that any materials need to be reconsidered. Again, check with your district librarian or your principal for this policy. They should be able to guide you in the direction of where to find that policy. So you have identified your school community, you have your selection policy, you know what you need to find, but now we're going to talk about how do you find out what teachers need. Okay, because as one of your priority members of the community, knowing what the teachers need is critical, and the number one thing that you can do is talk with them. Sometimes it's difficult between classes and other duties that you may have. It can be difficult to talk to them, but stop by their classroom after school. Talk with them at lunch. Just try to get an idea. Just let them know that you are trying to get materials that they need or that they want. If you can, attend their grade level meetings or their PLCs, and send out an email asking for suggestions. Conversely, you can send out emails letting them know what you do have, and being familiar with the standards, as a school librarian does need to be. You have an idea of the types of materials needed, such as primary resources, technology resources. You have an idea of some of the topics covered, but you need to be specific, and that's why talking with teachers is really important. And sometimes teachers don't have much idea of what it is you're trying to do. I was in a PLC one time, and there was a teacher who wanted me to get a subscription to a worksheet database, and that's fine, but that's not all that a school librarian does. We get resources and materials that help with their units, help with students who are struggling readers, maybe students that need extra accommodations. we can do that. We can find those materials. And luckily for me, a lot of the teachers I've ever worked with have been very good about understanding the role and the support that school librarians can give to teachers. And they understand that school librarians extend what's happening in the classroom. In the school library, they extend that learning. And again, for me, a lot of teachers have understood that and were very willing to go out of their way to talk with me and work with me to get the materials needed. But another avenue for finding out what teachers need is simply to look at the curriculum. Some districts will post the curriculum online by grade level or subject. And so you can go online and find out what units they're doing for any particular time of the year for different subjects. But also being familiar with the standards, that is critical. Maybe not know it all by heart, know all of the standards, especially if you're working in a K-12 school. It's really difficult. But be familiar with the standards and know how to reference the standards. That will help a lot when you're choosing materials for your library. Look at the assignments that students are working on. If a class comes into the library and they're doing research on wild animals, that's an indicator of the types of materials that a teacher needs. And so you know that maybe second grade does wild animals, and you're talking to the students about what animals they're researching. Well, for the following year, you could have more resources on some of those animals, or more resources on the habitats, and a variety of resources. That helps guide you. If students are doing graphing in kindergarten, they're learning about graphs. Well, do you have materials in the library that help teachers communicate that to students? Maybe a book on graphing, an app, something for the iPad that students can utilize, and that will help the teacher meet their curricular goals. And then other ideas, if you have other ideas about finding out what teachers need, please let me know. I'm very interested in knowing that and sharing it with all of you out there. Finding out what students are interested in, you can have a suggestion box for students to put their own suggestions in. And students, they have a wealth of knowledge about what's out there. They talk to each other, they get online a lot. When they go to Barnes and Noble, they see books that they're interested in, and it may not be something that crosses our radar. And so having an opportunity for students to offer their suggestions gives them a sense of ownership in the library, as well as making it possible to get some of the materials that they are interested in. And that is critical when you're selecting. One of the key criteria in selecting materials is that it's interesting to your community. And talking about criteria for selection, you've talked to teachers, you've talked to students, you know your selection policy, you know your community, and now it's time to get down, sit at the desk, or get down to business about actually selecting. And so criteria, you're looking for materials, whether they be apps, print, magazines, anthologies, software programs, open ed resources. You're looking for things that first and foremost are going to support the curriculum and the standards, because your library is part of a learning institution, and that's the community that the school library supports. And so the curriculum it's critical that you have materials that support the curriculum. But they also need to be materials that are appropriate for the school community, developmentally and intellectually. Again, if you are in a school library that serves a K-2 population, having materials, even if they're classics, having materials that are more relevant to a high schooler isn't going to serve your community well, and it would be a waste of your budget. It would be a waste of your school's resources that you're in charge of. So you need to think about what is appropriate developmentally for your population and intellectually. It's also important to take into account students that need accommodations. So being familiar with your student population, are there any that are hard of hearing? Are there any that have vision issues, autism, ADD, ADHD? Being aware of that will help you select materials that are going to be able to be utilized by your entire school community. And sometimes for vision impaired students, something as simple as having a device, an iPad, that helps them read the materials more easily. Sometimes that's what it takes. And then with that, a lot of times, if you're buying technology, then you need to be in contact with your IT department, because a lot of times they also will have a say in the types of technology that you can bring into the school library. Another criteria for selecting for the school library is it material that's of interest to the school community? Perhaps you have a large population of Mormon students, or you have a large population of Spanish-speaking students. Thinking about that and bringing in things that are of interest to everybody. You know, maybe not everybody will be interested in a particular material, but it's material that will be of interest to somebody and to a part of that population. So once you've determined that, you need to look at reviews and recommendations. It's impossible for a school librarian to sit down and read everything that comes out, or play with every app or program that comes out. It's just not feasible. And so reviews are a huge benefit when you're talking about making selections. And we will, in the next slide, I'm going to talk about where to find reliable reviews. But also when you're selecting, you want to make sure that you are getting materials that are representative of different viewpoints. Just because some of the teachers are vocal, or maybe parents are vocal about their beliefs, doesn't mean that that's the only side of the story that you bring into the school library. As a school library, even though we are part of the school, the learning institution, representing all sides and all ideas is part of what libraries are about. So we do have to remember that intellectual freedom is the basis for libraries. And so and whether or not we personally believe in these different sides, it's important that as the librarian, that you bring in objective materials that represent all different viewpoints. And that's also part of learning. You know, understanding that there's more to one side is part of learning who you are and what you believe in. And that's the opportunity that we give to students when we let them into the library and help them find materials to read. We're giving them the opportunity to form their own opinions. Another criteria is quality, and you want to find things that are current, they're relevant, they're accurate, and ideally from reputable publishers. Self-published materials won't often be supported in a school library for a number of reasons. One is that, again, you would have to read it yourself. You'd have to take an objective editorial stance to it and make sure it's of quality. And a lot of times we just don't have the time to do that. And so we rely on reputable publishers. And because that's what they do. They publish things that are quality material, quality content, quality proofing, and it's important to have a quality library collection. And again, currency, you want to make sure things are current, timely, accurate, no longer is Pluto considered a planet, so everything that says Pluto's a planet needs to be removed, and then um, new materials brought in to supplement that. Um, so those are some different things to keep in mind. Another criteria is format. And there's so many different formats out there. There's print, there's ebooks, there's graphic novels, apps, audio, video, magazines, databases, websites and portals, and music. So keeping in mind that you want a balance of those things, and perhaps your school doesn't have e-reading devices, well, then ebooks probably wouldn't be a very good investment. But if you do have devices, finding a source of ebooks is important, because that's another format that we're using in our world today, and that kids are growing up knowing how to use and will need to know how to use. So that's a list of criteria that you need to think about as you're making selections for your school library. Now, I mentioned reviews, and finding reliable reviews. I have a list here of just some of the sources in which to find reviews. And down at the bottom, you'll see I have Amazon.com and Goodreads. They're famous for having reviews, but use them judiciously, because anybody can post a review there. And so you want to read those reviews critically and look for ones that seem to be thoughtful. But some reliable sources are Novelist Plus, Novelist Plus K8. And for those of you in Wyoming, you can find those both on gowild.net, the web portal that is offered to all residents in Wyoming and all schools. So you can access that free of charge. It's available for everyone in Wyoming. A school library journal has tons of reviews. It's a great resource. If you don't have a subscription to it, I highly recommend it. And it would be, depending on your budget, it could be a very good investment to have a subscription to that, because they have so many reviews in there, and they're quality reviews. And it's just a great resource. I have to say, I think it's probably my favorite resource. Voya, Voice of Youth Advocates, you can go online, or if you have a subscription, they have reviews as well. Booklist Online, Hornbook, those are typically subscription as well, subscription sources. Kidsread.com is a website, and they focus on books for younger kids up to about tween, and they offer reviews. And the reviews that I've used from there have been good, have been valuable reviews. Teensread.com is a subsidiary of that same web publisher, web source, and they do the older books for kids. They also have some reliable reviews. Follett, if you use Follett, they offer reviews for their books. They aggregate the reviews from Kirkus, Hornbook, School Library Journal, and so you can access the reviews through Follett as well. And again, Amazon and Goodreads, which you want to be critical and thoughtful when you're reading those reviews. But those are just some of the myriad review sources that are out there. Publishers, vendors, I'm sure you get tons of catalogs in the mail, emails, but there's a lot of them, and you can buy from the publishers. They do have timely, current materials and resources. A lot of them delve into not just print, but ebooks, apps, databases. I know Abdo has their own suite of databases for all age groups. So they try to make it very easy for you to select and purchase materials. Down at the very bottom, I have Follett, Mackin, Junior Library Guild. Those I put in bold because they offer collection development packages. And with those, you can select grade level, you can select topics, formats, and their subscriptions. But what's nice about these is that you subscribe to particular packages, and then they'll choose the books, they'll send you the books. So if time is really tight, this is a good option because you don't have to sit down and um, sort out each material that you want. They will compile a selection for you and send it. And I know Junior Library Guild, a lot of their selections are award winners. They select them prior to them becoming awards, but for all of them, the teams that choose these books, they're thoughtful, they're just excellent selectors. And for all of these packages from all of these companies, you can rest easy knowing that you will get quality material. For you, it would just be a matter of choosing the grade levels, choosing the topics, choosing the formats, and for some of them, I know that you can mix and match packages. So these are options for time-crunched school librarians, as well as finding materials that fit within your budget. And to find out more about those, you can access each of those websites and find very easily how you can sign up for a subscription. So now I want to talk about gowild.net a little bit. And this is going to apply more directly to Wyoming school librarians. However, for those of you who are not in Wyoming, I encourage you to look at your state for resources like these. Wyoming offers a web portal that contains hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of databases and e-resources. And it's a great boon for those in Wyoming because anybody in Wyoming can access it and all schools can access it. So this is a really great resource. And so for those of you not in Wyoming, I know a lot of states, Nebraska has something like that. I think Michigan does as well. California doesn't, as far as I know, unfortunately. But look at your state library, find out from them. Also, there might be other districts in your state who are part of a consortium. Look into that as well, because sometimes for a district to purchase resources, it's not feasible financially. But getting together with other districts can make it possible. And it's a really great way to bring valuable resources to your school. So about gowild.net, when you're thinking about selecting for your school, you need to think about what you have access to already. I don't know of any school librarian who has unlimited budget. So when you are going to purchase materials, when you're going to select and purchase materials, you want to get the most bang for your buck. So knowing what you already have access to is going to help a lot in terms of not spending money on duplicating resources. So let's take a look at some things that gowild.net offers to Wyoming school librarians. Case in point, Zinio, which can be accessed on gowild.net, has lots of materials, lots of magazines that can be accessed online or downloaded that instead of buying subscriptions to, students can just go to a device, go to an iPad or a computer and look at these magazines. And then that's money that you don't have to spend on these magazines. Zinio, this is an example of the type of setup that Zinio offers. You can have up to 17 devices with a single username or password going, and any five devices open at one time. So perhaps you want to set up a station, for your library classes. You can have a magazine station. Kids can go to the table, utilize Zinio on the iPad or whatever devices you're using. I'm not promoting Apple here, but it can be a station and students can access this. Another benefit about GoWild.net is students can access this at home. Also, they can have an account set up with their parents and they can look at these at home. So this is a type of options that you have with GoWild.net that can help preserve your budget for things that you need in other formats or things that aren't offered through GoWild.net. I'm going to skip ahead real quick here. Here's a sampling of the GoWild.net resources, and this is just a small sample, but we have One Click Digital. Those are audiobooks, and you can check out audiobooks. Maybe you have a student who needs a little extra boost, so when they're reading the book, they can also listen to it. One Click Digital, you can do that. You have access to audiobooks, and they don't have every book available, especially a lot of the more current ones, because it does take time for audiobooks to be made. But they have a lot of current ones, and definitely classics, and a huge selection of teen, tween, and younger books. Freeding is an ebook app, and 3M Cloud Library. Those are all apps that you can utilize in your school library. There's databases, global issues and context, especially for the older students, your high school students who are doing research and current issues. You have those. Gale in context. There's history in context, world history in context. Encyclopedia Britannica is also available online. Opposing viewpoints in context. So students are doing a project and they need to research different viewpoints. That's a great resource for them. EBSCOhost, that's a suite of databases and a huge resource. Chilton Library for the people who want to access auto manuals. We have that right there. For teachers and the educators in the school, Educators Reference Complete, Teacher Reference Center. There's a History Study Center. Learning Express Library offers practice tests for the standardized test, great resource. National Geographic Kids. And again, these are just a few of the resources that school librarians in Wyoming already have access to. So that can help save money when you're making your selections. So be aware of it. And there's tutorials for all of these things. And the Wyoming State Library website can help you with that. I'm going to go back and talk about central acquisitions. And this is a program that is offered through Wyoming State Library, and if you purchase your books through the Central Acquisitions program, you can get discounts from vendors because we do so much bulk purchasing. So what you do is you set up an account with the Wyoming State Library, and then you can order things, and the Central Acquisitions people will handle the paying for it, handle the ordering, and any issues that arise with the vendor, and your account earns interest. So that's something that you might think about for Wyoming school librarians to stretch your dollar just a little bit further. And you can access, or you can find out more if you contact Melanie Reedy in our business office, and the number is here. And for all of these slides will be available on the website and also wyominglibraries.org after this webinar. But I want to recap here. Selecting for your school library is not an easy task, and it can be very time consuming. But any school librarian is trying to get the most out of their budget. And so being thoughtful and using some of these strategies will help you get quality materials um, into your library and will help you get more quality resources, because more is always merrier. But again, you need to identify your community. Figure out just who is in your community. Again, teachers and students, top priority right there. And find out what they're doing. Find out what they need, what's going to help support the instructional goals of your school and your district. Look at your selection policy. Know what you need, talk with your community, and knowing what resources you already have is critical as well. And sometimes you just need to replace something, and that can be easily done. You have a book that's been checked out so much, and it's still getting checked out, but it's falling apart. That makes it easy if that's all you're doing is replacing. But sometimes maybe you need to replace an older edition of something. Do you have the first edition of some nonfiction book, and being aware that you have the older edition can help guide you to, oh yeah, you need an updated version of that. You weren't aware that there was an updated version, but when you're going through all the reviews, you find out that there is, and that can also help. So knowing what you already have, look at reviews. Also, one thing I forgot to mention here, if the review sources that I mentioned will, like School Library Journal, they cover multimedia, audio visual, they cover apps. But another place, if you're looking for apps, another place to review apps is Common Sense Media. They have teacher reviewers, and what I like about their reviews is they offer application. How can this app be used in the classroom? And what's it about? And what are the drawbacks, the strengths and the weaknesses. So Common Sense Media is a good review source for apps as well. And then once you've done all that, you've looked at reviews, and you just need to identify the best course of action for your budget in your library. Is it going to be purchasing a subscription, a collection development subscription? Or is it going to be buying from particular publishers? Is it going to be buying from a vendor who has, like Follett, who supplies materials from a variety of publishers? So finding out what you're going to do, your best course of action, and of course deciding if you are going to get the materials processed or process them yourself. That's part selection, but also part purchasing and acquisitions. And so that's a topic for another day. But basically keeping in mind the criteria, how are you going to go about getting materials into your school library? And that's what reviews are for, being aware of the criteria and being aware of your school library community. Let's see. If you want more information, this is my contact information. But at the end of this the slideshow, there are some other resources listed, some selection policy resources. If you don't have a selection policy already in place, here are some resources for getting a selection policy in place. So a couple of things from ALA. And we have several resources here, but I just listed one, the Library Collection Development Policies for School Libraries and Learning Resource Centers. And we have that here at the Wyoming State Library, available for checkout. There's also some more collection development resources. And these are books that are available at the Wyoming State Library in our professional collection and can be checked out. Just general collection development guidelines, and the last one down here, no shelf required, that's specific to electronic books. And I will say, just before I close out, Follett's interesting, and if you use them, you will also find that they have a makerspace package, And for those of you interested in makerspaces, and that would be part of your collection development and selection. But again, same thing as with all materials. Know your community, know what you need, know what you can get to extend the learning that's already happening in the classroom. And keeping those things in mind will help you develop or maintain a quality school library. Now, if anybody has any questions, I would be happy to answer some. Type them into the chat box or in the questions box, and I'd love to hear from you. And other than that, I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you very much for joining me today for selecting for the school library collection. And I hope to see you next month. And again, this webinar will be available as an archive on the Wyoming State Library website and wyominglibraries.org. And thank you for joining me. Have a wonderful summer. Bye.